I sat on my balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline, savoring my morning coffee and the peaceful life I had built over the past 5 years since cutting all ties with my family. My career in cybersecurity was thriving. My apartment felt like a sanctuary, and for once I felt truly secure. Then my phone rang with an unknown number. A familiar knot formed in my stomach as I answered. The voice on the other end froze me in place. It was my mother, breaking 5 years of silence. Before I tell you about the call that turned my world upside down, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding peace after trauma. Growing up in the suburbs of Portland, I always felt the weight of expectations from my parents. My father, Harold, was a prominent attorney whose name appeared on billboards across the city. My mother, Martha, worked as a high school principal, known for her strict discipline and unwavering standards. Our 2-story colonial house with its manicured lawn looked picture-perfect from the outside, just like we were supposed to be. From my earliest memories, excellence was not celebrated but expected. A 98% on a math test would earn me a questioning look from my father, who would ask about the missing 2%. Piano recitals, baseball games, science fairs, it did not matter the arena. The message remained constant. Jeffersons do not settle for second best. My relationship with my parents grew increasingly strained during high school. While they mapped out my future as a lawyer following in my father's footsteps, I discovered my passion for computer science. The arguments began when I joined the coding club instead of debate team. They escalated when I applied to Oregon State University for their computer science program instead of pre-law at my father's alma mater. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I expected another fight. Instead, my parents responded with cold disappointment. My mother simply said, "I hope you know what you are throwing away." My father did not speak to me for 3 days. Their silent disapproval hurt more than any shouting match. Despite their reaction, I thrived at Oregon State. My professors praised my aptitude for network security, and I graduated near the top of my class. The freedom of college life showed me what it felt like to make my own choices without constant judgment. For the first time, I felt I could breathe. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at SoftStream, a small but growing software company in Portland. The salary was modest, but the opportunity to work on real security protocols excited me. Rather than congratulating me, my parents sent links to law school applications, still hoping I would come to my senses. It was at SoftStream that I met Amanda. She worked in the marketing department, and we first connected during a company picnic, when she overheard me passionately explaining encryption methods to a bored-looking colleague. She later told me she was drawn to my enthusiasm rather than the technical jargon. Amanda had warm brown eyes that crinkled when she laughed, and a way of listening that made you feel truly heard. Our relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months, we moved into an apartment together, adopting a rescue dog named Pixel. For once, my life felt completely aligned. I was excelling at work, in love with an amazing woman, and finally building something that was entirely mine. My parents met Amanda exactly twice. The first time at a stiff dinner, where they interrogated her about her family background, education, and career aspirations. The second was at a holiday gathering where my mother made several pointed comments about people who settle for less than they deserve. Amanda came from a working-class family in Boise. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a nurse. They had put her through state college with scholarships and loans. In my parents' eyes, this made her unsuitable regardless of her intelligence or ambition. 2 years into my career, I received a significant promotion to lead security analyst after preventing a potentially devastating breach. The CEO personally thanked me, and my team celebrated with drinks after work. That night, drunk on success and happiness, I decided to propose to Amanda. When I shared this plan with my parents over Sunday dinner, expecting at least reluctant acceptance, my father slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You are throwing away your potential on a dead-end career, and now you want to marry someone with no connections or family standing," he said, his voice cold. "We did not raise you to be so ordinary, Jefferson." My mother nodded in agreement. "Think about your future children. Do you want them to have a grandmother who works with her hands for a living? I left their house that night shaking with rage, promising myself I would limit contact with them going forward. Little did I know that this argument would be the least of the betrayals to come. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 weeks later. I arrived at work to find the head of HR and our CEO waiting at my desk. They asked me to come to the conference room, where they explained that financial records showed unusual activity. Client payment information had been accessed at odd hours and small amounts of money had gone missing from company accounts. The access logs show your credentials. Jefferson, the CEO, said, his expression grave. Is there anything you want to tell us? I was stunned. Not only had I done nothing wrong, but as the security lead, I knew that credential spoofing was a common tactic in data breaches. I explained this, offering to investigate immediately. They allowed me to continue working, but restricted my access to financial systems. In the following days, I noticed colleagues avoiding eye contact. Conversations would stop when I entered the break room. Amanda became distant, often working late and answering my questions with short, clipped responses. Only Marcus, a fellow developer I had mentored, and Lisa from Quality Assurance still treated me normally. Marcus even warned me that rumors were circulating that I had been selling customer data on the dark web. I know you would never do that, but someone is working hard to make it look like you did, he said quietly over lunch. Watch your back. A week later, I woke to pounding on my apartment door at 6 a.m. 2 police officers stood there with a search warrant for my laptop and devices. They explained I was being investigated for electronic theft, fraud, and data trafficking. As they searched our home, Amanda stood in the corner, arms crossed. When they found an external hard drive containing what appeared to be customer credit card information hidden in my desk drawer, a drive I had never seen before, her face hardened. I cannot believe you, she whispered. I defended you to everyone. That night, after being questioned for hours and released pending charges, I returned to find half of Amanda's belongings gone and a note saying she was staying with a friend. She would not answer my calls or texts. In her rush to leave, she had forgotten her tablet. Desperate for answers, I unlocked it, knowing her password. What I found shattered my world. Text messages between Amanda and my best friend Patrick revealed not only that they had been having an affair for months, but they had discussed how convenient my legal troubles were for their relationship. Even more disturbing was a message from an unknown number, with instructions on when to leave the apartment for the police search, suggesting someone had tipped Amanda off about the raid. The case moved quickly to trial. My court-appointed attorney seemed uninterested in my claims of innocence, suggesting I take a plea deal. When I refused, insisting on fighting, he went through the motions without enthusiasm. The evidence against me appeared overwhelming. My login credentials had accessed the systems, the stolen data was found in my possession, and several colleagues testified about my unusual behavior in recent weeks. The turning point came during cross-examination of the company's CEO, Michael Pearson. My attorney asked about previous security breaches, and Pearson mentioned working with a personal attorney on a separate legal matter months earlier. Something clicked in my mind. I scribbled a note and passed it to my lawyer. He looked surprised, but asked, "Was that personal attorney, Harold Jefferson, by any chance?" The courtroom seemed to freeze. Pearson hesitated before admitting, "Yes, my father had represented him in his divorce proceedings the previous year." Further questioning revealed my mother and Pearson served together on an educational foundation board. I felt physically ill as the connections formed in my mind. When I turned to look at my parents sitting in the back of the courtroom, my father's expression remained impassive while my mother looked away. Despite this revelation, the judge ruled the connection irrelevant to the evidence at hand. 3 days later, the jury found me guilty. I was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. As officers led me away, I locked eyes with my father. "Why?" I asked simply. His response haunts me to this day. Sometimes a man needs to learn the hard way that actions have consequences. You will thank us one day for this lesson. Later, through Marcus's continued investigation, I would discover the full truth. My parents had worked with Pearson to frame me, believing a harsh wake-up call would force me to abandon my chosen career and relationship after my covenant release. They never expected the sentence to be so severe, apparently thinking I would receive probation. The final betrayal came when I learned that Amanda had been seeing Patrick for nearly a year. They moved in together 2 weeks after my conviction into a new apartment Patrick could suddenly afford on his junior developer salary. As the prison doors closed behind me, I made a vow I would never speak to my parents again, and I would find a way to clear my name, no matter how long it took. Federal prison was exactly as terrifying as you might imagine for a first-time offender who had spent his life behind computer screens. The concrete walls, metal doors, and constant noise created a sensory nightmare after the quiet focus I was accustomed to. The first week, I barely spoke, observing the complex social dynamics while trying to become invisible. That strategy ended when Luis noticed me in the common area. A former hacker serving 7 years for crashing a major airline's booking system, Luis had an eye for spotting fellow tech people. "You carry yourself like someone more comfortable with machines than people," he said, sitting across from me uninvited. "What are you in for?" After hearing my story, Luis shook his head. "Classic frame job. The hard drive plant is amateur hour 101. Want to learn how to make sure it never happens again." Under Luis's guidance, I transformed my understanding of cybersecurity. What I had learned in college and on the job was foundational, but Luis showed me the offensive side, the vulnerabilities I had never considered. Together, we spent hours each day with the limited computer access we were allowed in the education center, him teaching me how real hackers think. "Knowledge is freedom," Luis would say, "even in here." 3 months into my sentence, I received my first letter from my parents. I returned it unopened. Same with the second, third, and every letter after. When they tried to visit, I refused to see them. Their betrayal was too profound, too calculated for me to even consider their explanations or apologies. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my knowledge and planning for life after release. With Luis's teachings and my legitimate background, I realized I could reposition myself as a security expert with insider knowledge of how systems get compromised. The breakthrough in my case came 6 months later when Noah arrived. A new inmate from Portland, he had worked at Tech Dynamics, SoftStream's main competitor. During a late-night conversation, he mentioned knowing Michael Pearson through industry events. "That guy is as crooked as they come," Noah said. He was desperate after the venture capital funding fell through. There were rumors he orchestrated the data breach himself for the insurance money. This information reinvigorated my hope. I contacted Marcus through the prison email system, asking him to look into Pearson's financials around the time of the breach. Marcus, who had never believed in my guilt, eagerly agreed. Over the next year, Marcus became my outside investigator, working nights and weekends. He discovered Pearson had taken out a significant cyber insurance policy just weeks before the breach. He also found that Patrick had received a mysterious promotion and salary increase shortly after my conviction, despite his limited experience. The most damning evidence came when Marcus befriended a junior IT staff member who confessed to being paid to install the credential spoofing software that framed me. He had been told it was part of a security test and had no idea of its real purpose until it was too late. 18 months into my sentence, my case was reopened based on new evidence. The court appointed Andrew Keller, a public defender with a reputation for fighting wrongful convictions. Unlike my previous attorney, Andrew believed in my innocence and worked tirelessly to build our case. The retrial revealed the elaborate scheme. Michael Pearson had orchestrated the data theft to claim insurance money when his company was failing. My father, through their previous professional relationship, had suggested me as the perfect scapegoat, believing the experience would straighten me out and force me to reconsider law school. My mother had used her connection to Amanda through charity work to gather information about our home routines and when I would be away. What none of them had anticipated was the forensic evidence Marcus and the new IT witness provided, showing exactly when and how the credential spoofing occurred, and tracing it back to Pearson's executive computer. When the judge announced my conviction was overturned, I felt no joy, only exhaustion. Pearson was led away in handcuffs, charged with fraud evidence, tampering, and perjury. Patrick faced charges for his role in planting evidence. Amanda avoided prosecution by cooperating, though her testimony revealed she had suspected my innocence, but chose to believe what was convenient for her new relationship. My parents were never criminally charged, due to insufficient evidence of their direct involvement in the framing. But the civil suit I later filed was settled out of court for an amount that gave me financial freedom. Upon my release, I declined interviews and avoided publicity. Instead, I accepted a job offer from a prestigious cybersecurity firm in Seattle, 200 miles and one state away from my past in Portland. I started a private blog, documenting my experience of being falsely convicted and the security vulnerabilities that made it possible. The blog unexpectedly went viral within tech circles, and I began receiving messages from others who had been falsely accused of digital crimes. This community of survivors became a support network, and eventually I established a non-profit organization offering technical expertise to those fighting similar battles. As for my parents, I maintained absolute silence. No calls, no emails, no response to their letters of apology that arrived monthly. The wound was too deep, the betrayal too fundamental to consider reconciliation. In my mind, they had died the day they chose to teach me a lesson, by destroying my life. Seattle became my sanctuary, a place to rebuild without shadows from my past. My apartment overlooking Lake Union became the first home that truly felt mine, decorated with hiking photographs I had taken, exploring the Pacific Northwest, and bookshelves filled with technical manuals and crime novels. My work in cybersecurity flourished, as my unique perspective on vulnerability assessment attracted high-profile clients. The blog evolved into a resource center for the wrongfully accused, and I occasionally spoke at legal conferences about the intersection of technology and justice. 3 years into this new life, I met Sophia at one such conference. A forensic psychologist specializing in trauma recovery, she approached me after my speech with thoughtful questions about the psychological impact of false accusations. Our professional relationship evolved into friendship, then cautiously into something more. Unlike my whirlwind relationship with Amanda, Sophia and I moved slowly, each of us carrying our own histories of betrayal. Her ex-husband had been a pathological liar who had left her with emotional scars that mirrored my own trust issues in strange ways. Trauma survivors recognize each other, she once told me. We speak the same unspoken language. With Sophia's professional insight and personal understanding, I finally addressed the psychological damage my experience had caused. I joined a support group for ex-honorees, people who had served time for crimes they did not commit. Hearing their stories helped contextualize my own, showing me that while my experience was painful, I was not alone. For the first time since before my arrest, I felt genuinely at peace. My hypervigilance subsided. I stopped checking for surveillance when entering my home. I could hear a police siren without my heart rate spiking. These small victories felt monumental. Then came the phone call that threatened to unravel everything. It was a Tuesday morning. I was preparing for a client meeting when my phone rang with an unknown Portland area code. Something made me answer instead of sending it to voicemail as I usually would. Jefferson. My mother's voice sounded older, frailer than I remembered. Please do not hang up. My hand tightened around the phone as conflicting emotions surged through me. Part of me wanted to end the call immediately. Another part, one I had thought long silenced, wanted to hear what she would say. Your father has stage 4 pancreatic cancer, she continued into my silence. The doctors give him 2 months, at most. He is asking to see you. The news hit like a physical blow. Despite everything, the thought of my father dying stirred complicated feelings I had buried beneath years of justified anger. Why should I care? I finally responded, my voice colder than I intended. You should not, my mother said, surprising me. What we did was unforgivable. I am not calling to ask for forgiveness. I am just delivering his request. The decision is entirely yours. After she provided his hospital information, we sat in uncomfortable silence. For what it is worth, Jefferson, not a day passes that I do not regret what we did to you, she said before hanging up. I sat motionless for several minutes, the phone still in my hand. Then I called Sophia. Over dinner that night, we discussed the situation from every angle. My initial reaction was a firm no. Why give them the closure they sought? When they had shown me no mercy, you do not owe them anything. Sophia agreed. But sometimes we do things not for others, but for our own peace. For 2 weeks I wrestled with the decision. I spoke with my support group and my therapist. I hiked the Cascade Mountains, pushing myself physically, while my mind worked through the emotional tangle. In the end, I decided to go not for my father's redemption, but for my own closure. I needed to look him in the eye one last time, not as the frightened young man being led away in handcuffs, but as the person I had become despite his betrayal. The hospital room was dim when I entered. My father looked small in the bed, his once imposing frame withered by disease. My mother sat beside him, her hair now completely gray. They both looked up with identical expressions of shock, clearly not expecting me to actually come. "You came," my father whispered, his voice rough. "Not for you," I replied honestly. "For me." What followed was the most honest conversation we had ever had. My father, perhaps freed by his approaching death, admitted their scheme had started as a way to scare me straight, to push me toward law school after my release. They had never anticipated actual prison time or the extent of the evidence Pearson would manufacture. "We thought we were teaching you about consequences," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "Instead, we destroyed your life and learned about consequences ourselves." They had lost everything in the aftermath. My father's law practice collapsed when our connection to the case became public. My mother was forced to resign from her position. Former friends abandoned them. The settlement from my lawsuit took most of their retirement savings. "We deserved worse," my father said. "I have spent 3 years trying to figure out how a father could do what I did to his son. I still have no answer that makes sense, except that I was so blinded by my vision of what your life should be that I could not see the man you had already become." I did not offer forgiveness that day, or in the visits that followed over his final weeks. But I did find something unexpected, the ability to see them as deeply flawed humans rather than the monsters they had become in my mind. After my father's funeral, a small, somber affair, attended by few, I told my mother I would answer her calls occasionally, that we could have a limited relationship with clear boundaries. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of something that acknowledged our shared past without being consumed by it. Back in Seattle, I expanded my work with ex-honorees, establishing a foundation that provides technological support and expert witnesses for those fighting wrongful convictions. Each person helped feels like reclaiming a piece of what was taken from me. I have learned that true freedom is not about cutting ties to the past, but living fully in the present where the past no longer holds power over you. Sometimes we must walk through hell to appreciate the heaven we build for ourselves. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between cutting someone off completely or allowing them back into your life with boundaries? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming betrayal and finding strength in unexpected places. Remember to share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to face whatever battles you are fighting today.